Eski FBI ajanı Paul Williams, CIA-FETÖ uyuşturucu üçgeni ile ilgili yazboz programında şok açıklamalarda bulundu. Eski FBI ajanı, CIA'in uyuşturucu ticaretinde terörist başı Gülen'in okullarını kullandığını söyledi. CIA'in bu yoldan elde ettiği paralarla FETÖ'yü desteklediğini belirten Williams, FETÖ'nün son dönemlerde Gladio operasyonlarında kullanıldığını söyledi.
My name is Paul Williams. I'm work for the FBI. The money that he has all came from the CIA, and I have been at the Gulen complex, investigated Mr. Gulen for years and years and years. Gulen for the United States represented a way that they could control the Turkish government. The United States is very much concerned in gaining the natural resources around the Caspian Sea, in Kazakhstan, that area, stretching throughout Central Asia. That has been our strategy for quite a long time. Now, all these stand countries, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Turkestan, as you know very well, all share a Turkish culture. So the CIA thought they could unite all of these different Stan republics under Gulen. And therefore, for many years, we have, with the Gulen schools throughout Central Asia, within each Gulen school, there was a CIA operative. And that gave them cover. They could make these countries increasingly militantly Islamic, all to unite them to Gulen. And through Gulen, we would create this vast empire throughout Central Asia, with Turkey as a proxy, controlled by Gulen. And we, in turn, would control Gulen. Gulen, you gotta understand that Gulen, in terms of his financial resources, has over $50 billion. This came out in court documents here. $50 billion in assets. These assets, of course, were not accumulated by Gulen's business acumen or his educational background. The guy is very poorly, really educated. He has what amounts to a third-grade education. He doesn't speak English. The money that he has all came from the CIA. And with the CIA, through the CIA, he managed to purchase the leading newspaper in Turkey, the Turkish television outlets. He managed to set up his own construction company, but all this was with CIA money. It's not his money, it's the CIA money. Well, you got to understand that after he tried to overthrow the government in Turkey, as you guys well know, back in 1998, he was transported to the United States in U.S. military transport. He landed in Washington, D.C., and from Washington, D.C., the CIA transported him to Pennsylvania, where he set up this compound, and he presently lives. Well, Gulen was very much involved in Operation Gladio. In the beginning, with the CIA, Chotley was the leading U.S. gladiator. And you remember that Chotley was going back to I think it was 1987. He was in a prison in Switzerland, and we sent a NATO helicopter, and it landed. The door to his jail cell suddenly opened. He was transported by a NATO helicopter to Brussels, and from Brussels he was brought to Chicago. And in Chicago, Chatley was granted U.S. credentials, a U.S. passport, and he was transported from there to Central Asia, to the same areas where the Gulen schools were set up. Once again, this was all the CIA's attempt to start a pan-Turkish movement throughout the republics in Central Asia. After Chatley died, his successor was Gulen. If anyone has any doubts about the CIA's ties to Gulen, all they need to do is look at when he applied for permanent residency in the United States. Look at who supported his application. Graham Fuller, who was a leading CIA operative, Morton Abramovitz, who was the U.S. ambassador, former U.S. ambassador to Turkey, Mark Roseman, who was a former U.S. ambassador to Turkey. Look right now who is the leading Turkish lobbyist in the United States. He works for Gulen, and his name is Porter Goss, who is a CIA director. So the ties between Gulen and the CIA, once again, are, I mean, you can't question that. That's already established fact. Gulen is the reason that he's so important is that Gulen, and how are you going to unite all these different countries, these stand countries, into one new Islamic world order? You can do that politically, like they did in the Ottoman times, or else you can do it religiously by setting up schools, by indoctrinating the students in Gulen's form of Islam, which is really militant. And through that, all these different republics become united in one movement. That's why Gulen was so strategic for years and years and years. And as long as his schools are still in place throughout Central Asia and throughout the United States, he will remain a very, very prominent power. The CIA, if the people in Turkey aren't aware that going back now decades, the coups that occurred in Turkey, the politics that are taking place, the political climate has always been controlled by the CIA, and it presently is. When you see right now, even what's taking place in Syria, it's all instigated by the CIA, and it's all concerns the vast resources around the Caspian Sea. We want those resources. We don't want those resources to go to China. We don't want them to go to Russia. We want the resources. And that's why Syria, if you're creating a pipeline going from the Caspian Sea, the basin of the Caspian Sea, is of course Iran. And it's going from Iran, this pipeline, through northern Iraq into Syria. That's why Syria is so strategic. Care less about Turkey. They're concerned about the economics, about the money. And it's right there at the basin of the Caspian Sea. And as long as the money is there and we can use Turkey, we will. We will conduct more coups. We will create more political turmoil. We will do everything that's necessary to get those resources, because with those resources comes control of the world order. And that's what, as you know, that's what it's all about. Well, you got to realize that through his schools, he's spreading his ideology. And his ideology, he calls it, as you know, like he's setting up these, he calls them points of light throughout Central Asia and throughout the United States and throughout, let's face it, his schools are in Europe as well. And through these schools, he's indoctrinating students into his movement, into his ideology. And once you control hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students, you're controlling a great political force. And in order to eradicate that force, you have to really shut down every school he has throughout Central Asia. Sure, Well, you got to realize that the CIA, or the money that the CIA gets for covert operations is not allocated by Congress or the Senate. It's not in the U.S. budget. The money for covert activities has always come, going back to 1947, from the drug trade. We have been heavily involved, the CIA, in the drug trade for decades. That's what brought us into Vietnam. That's what brought us into Afghanistan. That's what's bringing us now into Mexico. We control the heroin trade. And from that heroin trade, we have been able to fund the Gulen movement and the Gulen schools. And once again, Gulen has only been a proxy for the CIA. And it's only to further an economic end. But all of the money for the CIA, this has been documented for. As a matter of fact, even in Senate hearings here in the United States, the church hearings, the Kerry Commission hearings that were conducted here, it all came out that the CIA had established banks throughout the world to launder drug money. Banks in Australia, banks in Pakistan, banks in Miami. They've even used the Vatican Bank to launder the money. But the CIA, all the money for black ops, for the way that they can mount coups in Turkey and false flag attacks in Italy and control the governments in Latin America, all has come from the drug trade. Yeah. And Gulen is part of that. Where do you think that $50 billion you're talking about, one of the richest men in the world? Gulen has a third grade education. He's a backwoods religious leader of no substance at all. He's never really written a book of his own. He's never written an article of his own. I mean, the guy is a complete puppet for the CIA. Without them, he's nothing. Well, you know, people in the United States, if you say Susurluk or you say Shotley, or you say these names, even if you say Gulen, most people in the United States won't know who you're talking about. These things are lost to them entirely. But Susurluk, as you know, revealed a great deal. It revealed we have controlled your intelligence agency for years. It was set up by the CIA. It was set up by the CIA. We controlled every bit of intelligence that was conducted in Turkey. I was probably one of the only people in the United States who actually trespassed on Gulen's property. I wasn't invited there. I trespassed with a cameraman, and I know what's going on in his complex. And nobody else, I don't think, has filmed it or shot it or been there. I've been there. I know what's up there. His compound, once again, is on about 40 acres in a very remote area of Pennsylvania. He lives in a chalet, in the third floor of a chalet. You cannot get on that property because you have to really go through the woods, because there's sentry posts guarding every entranceway into the property. I went through the woods with a colleague of mine. On his site there, you have a great deal of young Turks who are brought in from Turkey, mostly on student visas. They're trained. They're almost like a Turkish army on American soil. At that compound, there's a firing range. There's a helicopter that circles that area all the time, looking for people like me who might trespass on his property. But I have trespassed on his property. I was brought into one of his sentry posts, and I was questioned. But I pretty much know what's going on there. I mean, the neighbors who live there have spoken to me about the gunfire that erupts there continuously, about the helicopter that's always circling the place, about the way that it's in any other city or any other place in the United States, this would not be tolerated. But the fact that it is tolerated shows that he is protected. And once again, further proof that he is protected is when the FBI tried to deport him. And the Homeland Security here, because they realized how dangerous he is, tried to deport him. But any attempt to deport him was thwarted, was stopped by the CIA, by Graham Fuller, who showed up at his hearing, by Morton Abramovitz and Mark Grossman and all these other people who showed up saying how wonderful Gulen is and what a wonderful asset he is to the United States. He's not an asset at all. The guy can't even speak English. He is a complete goon. But once again, he serves their purpose.